everybody. I'm Brian Enton in for Ashleigh tonight. We are live. It is Monday night. I hope you had a great weekend. You will never guess how we are going to start the show tonight. And it is actually a crime story right now, so it fits into our crime genre, but it's a little nutty. Vampires. Now, going into this, I did not know a ton about vampires. Of course, I know all the movies and shows and Twilight. And I actually did go to a vampire bar once with my dad in New Orleans for his birthday, but it's very touristy. It's like you bought a T-shirt and you got to go into this vampire bar. But there's actually groups of vampires in America, like real vampires, apparently. Dayton, Ohio has this big vampire population, we learned today. And there is a very mysterious murder case there that could be tied to the vampire scene. It is the topic of a new Netflix show that's going to come out later this year, where they dig into a secret ritual that may be behind a man's death. And we are going to dig into it tonight. The murder, the vampire culture, which again is apparently a thing. The question of whether all vampires are really bad. I know it sounds crazy even for this show. We've even got a vampire couple that will be coming on to talk about all of this. All that's coming up in just a moment. Also tonight, nothing is more upsetting to me than when people leave their babies in hot cars or dogs. I'm from Florida. You don't do that. I am literally the crazy guy. I will hunt you down in the grocery store if you leave your dog in the car. I've almost broken out windows 2 times. And this story tonight, though, it is just so tragic and enraging. There's an Arizona dad facing first-degree murder charges in the death of his 2-year-old daughter. You see the dad right there. Investigators say he left her in the car. He was baking in the hot sun. More than 3 hours, he apparently forgot his daughter was in the car. He was inside the house playing video games. Now, his wife, who is a doctor, by the way, says all of this was just a big mistake. But there are now these text messages in the case that show that she warned him not to leave the kids in the car before. And the question tonight is, do the charges fit the crime? There's also new body cam footage of his reaction to first responders. There's a lot of moving pieces to this one. We're going to break it down for you. We're going to show you the new body camera video. That's coming up a little bit later in the show. And also a major development in a story that we have been following very, very closely. Tessa Trotter, you remember that name. She was beaten, she was stabbed, she was burned, she was left for dead in front of her 2 children. Well, tonight we've got an update on her condition. Some good news here. Gosh, this was such an incredible interview Ashleigh did last week with this woman. We've also tonight got an interview with Good Samaritans. They ran into Tessa's burning house to pull her to safety. So we're going to have an update on her story. And it's some good news tonight, which if you saw that interview with Banfield, it was just so heartbreaking. Okay. But first tonight, when you think of vampires, true crime might not necessarily come to mind. Vampires are fiction, mysterious creatures of the night who sleep in coffins and drain victims of their blood with sharp, pointy fangs. You've seen them in the movies. They've inspired generations of Halloween costumes and books, and of course, some of the best horror films of all time.
I am Dracula.
Oh, it's really good to see you.
Welcome to my home.
It's Blade. It's the Daywalker.
Initiation's over, Michael. It's time to join the club.
Have you said your goodbyes to the light?
Oh, man, Interview with the Vampire. That was a good one. Okay, but vampires aren't real, or are they? An upcoming Netflix documentary alleges that Dayton, Ohio is home to one of the largest covens of vampires in America. You heard me right, Dayton, Ohio. Who would have thought? The Netflix film titled Vampires in Gem City, it looks at the Dayton Coven's potential ties to the disappearance of a man who has not been seen since 1994. On October 13th of that year, it was a Thursday, a roofer named George Phillip, his name was George Phillip Gall. He left the home he shared with his wife and infant daughter. It was around 11 o'clock at night. He got on a local bus, and he got off near a goth-themed nightclub called Asylum. The driver of the bus said Gall walked towards Asylum, and he was never, ever seen again. The bus driver was the last person to see him. Well, in 2002, Gall was declared dead by the state, but the case remained unsolved. Then in 2008, a retired Dayton police officer named David Williams made a shocking claim to a local newspaper. Williams said he went undercover at Asylum the same year Gall went missing, and there was a bartender who told him that Gall was used in a cult ritual upstairs and that he was actually beheaded. Now, the bartender says Gall's head was sold as a relic to an occultist right there in the club. Really shady stuff happening in that club. Supposedly, the rest of Gall's body was dumped in a storm sewer. Now, when Williams and other officers searched the sewer, there was no sign of Gall, but they did find occult markings. A study by a group called the Atlanta Vampire Alliance, we don't know, Atlanta Vampire Alliance, 2015 said 5,000 people in the U.S. actually identify as vampires, and some really do drink blood, but only from willing donors. You'll even find some of them showing off their fangs on TikTok. They're all over TikTok, apparently. And my next guest has witnessed the vampire culture firsthand. Now, if you're a fan of the show, we usually introduce Dr. Kathleen Ramsland as a forensic psychologist, which she is, world-renowned, but she has also immersed herself in the past in the vampire cultures, especially in the 1990s, while she was following the case of a missing journalist. She was writing her book, Piercing the Darkness. She attended vampire parties and balls. She even had a set of fangs made for herself. And I am joined by Dr. Ramsland right now. And just in full disclosure, I was at a conference with Dr. Ramsland, and we went out for a drink, and we were talking about serial killers, because that is her expertise. And she started to tell me how she went underground with the vampires, which I found to be fascinating. And I did not realize, Dr. Ramsland, that you also even had, like, fangs made for the whole experience.
Yeah, it was an interesting experience. I wanted to find out what happened to this missing woman, and because I had done some writing with Anne Rice there were guides to her vampire universe. I wanted to go into this world. My literary agent thought I could get in, and I did. And I went to the parties. I went to meet people alone at night in various places. I went to a number of different events to find out what this subculture was about, hopefully to find this woman. I didn't find her, but I did find out a lot about the people and why they were so attracted to this subculture.
So why are they? I mean, is it more of like kind of a role play situation, or are these actual like vampires that actually drink each other's blood?
It's all of that. It was, at the time I was in it, it was a huge subculture, thousands, tens of thousands of people. The internet, there was no social media at the time. The internet had really just started. There were chat rooms, there were ways to connect. There were live action role-playing games. Then people would travel from one city to another for weeks at a time, playing out their roles. And the attraction is different for different people. Some wanted to be vampires because they wanted that sense of power and transformation and supernatural, larger-than-life aura. Some wanted to be victims. Some wanted to be vampire hunters. Some shapeshifters would get into this subculture. It overlapped with the goth subculture, so it was really quite rich.
Was there ever anything you saw that made you uncomfortable? Like, what was the craziest thing that you saw while you were pretending to be a vampire?
I think the blood sports was probably the craziest. Where people would cut themselves, scarification it was called, but they would just let blood run all over them. There was blood drinking in my presence. There were people who formed kind of families where they were safe. It was like a safe sex situation where their blood had been tested for any kind of diseases so that they knew that drinking from one another was safe. And they weren't really into the immortality idea of the vampire, like the mythical creature. They had redefined the vampire from my sense of Dracula and Barnabas Collins and all of that. They had completely redefined the vampire to be what they wanted it to be and to work for them. And that was really kind of interesting.
So what do you know about this Dayton, Ohio situation? Because apparently there's this big Netflix documentary that's going to be coming out later this year that's already getting a lot of publicity. What have you heard about what's been going on in Ohio? Or when I guess it was decades ago, really.
It was decades ago. Yeah. And I would have to say, bring evidence, because the vampire community back then and even now was not about human sacrifice. It was really about transformation, a sense of belonging for marginalized people. There are crimes committed, but they're rare for that community. And they're really more about the vampire metaphor, whereas a beheading is not part of the vampire metaphor. It's more, satanic or, some other kind of ritual. So I would suggest if this guy was actually murdered by these people, and I don't know that there's evidence that he had something to do with something else besides the vampires, because that really wasn't what that community was about.
I'm just thinking about some of the things that you yourself witnessed in terms of like the blood. I mean, if two people are willing, is it illegal to be to be a vampire?
It's legal to voluntarily share blood with other people, but there were people like John Crutchley comes to mind, where he would abduct women, hold them captive, and drink their blood. And that is illegal.
Yeah, of course.
That clearly he's crossing a line there. So it depends on what they're doing with it and whether the people involved are doing this voluntarily.
Listen, Dr. Ramsland, as the world's preeminent expert on serial killers, I have a very hard time envisioning you with the fangs and, chilling with the vampires, but it's fascinating. I didn't realize you wrote a book on it. So thank you for sharing your expertise. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Fun to talk to you.
Okay, I'm joined now by a couple who live in the actual vampire world. Maven Lore is a fangsmith, that's what you call it, who designs and sells fangs, and a member of the New Orleans Vampire Court. And Pixie Cat lives her life as Fae or Fairy, and is the Pixie Princess of the Vampire Court of New Orleans. It's quite a title. I hope I got it right. Maven, I want to start with you. I mean, look, I know there's a lot of misinterpretations of what vampire culture is like, and like what Dr. Ramsland just said, I guess typically it's not like violent in the sense of killing people and that kind of thing. Do you identify actually as a vampire, Maven?
I do, yes. And actually, I agree for the most part about what Catherine Ramsland has said.
So what does it mean? You hear that there's 5,000 estimated right now, I think, in America. What does it mean to be a vampire?
It means something different to everybody. I can list a few broad topics here. Oh, look there I am. Okay, so you have different types of feeders. You have different types of beliefs. You have sanguine feeders. You have psychic feeders. You have sexual feeders. You also have people who, like myself, are into the philosophy of being a vampire. That's a whole bag of whatever there right there. There's people who are use it as part of their religious practices. There are people who are role players. There are people who just like to, go on the weekend and dress up. Does it have to do with, I just think of the movies and, pop culture. That's basically what I know about it. Does it all have to do with blood? I think that's the most boring topic, to be honest with you. It's just like when people say, hey, do you drink blood? It's the first thing you ask. And I was like, I've done all these things in my life. I've been all these places. You want to know what I have for breakfast. Yeah. Right. Well,
but look, people are curious. I hate to fall into that trap, but I am curious. That's the first thing you think of, though. Do you drink blood? Is that just part of being a vampire?
I'm a sexual feeder.
Okay, a sexual feeder. Okay, I won't go down that road. We got to
keep it PG, right?
We got to keep it PG, but I think people can, I guess, put two and two together there. Pixie, what brought you into the lifestyle? Do you also identify as a vampire?
I don't identify as a vampire. I identify more as fae. Generally, I came into the vampire scene. It was like my friends were goth, heavy metal people, and we all orbited around each other. It was like, it didn't matter. Some people wore fangs, some people wore super spiked hair, some people were just different. This was, for me, it was early 2010s when I was around people. From what I understand, it was like, it's interesting because I never actually asked any of my vampire friends if they drank blood. I would ask...
Because you knew better.
No, I would ask, how did you get your fangs? That was my... I've had people... Yes.
So you actually make the fangs, Maven, right? I mean, that's what you... Is that what you do for a living?
That's right. I'm a fangsmith.
And how do you do it?
I take a mold of someone's teeth. I use real dental acrylic. I pop the mold off, shave it down, polish it, and pretty much that's it. I mean, that's the basic gist of it.
So what do you make? I mean, to both of you, what do you make? You know, there's this Netflix doc coming out. There's obviously something went down in Dayton, Ohio, with the man losing his life, and there was the goth club. What do you make? I mean, have you guys done any research into it? Is this something that
yeah, I read about it.
What do you think?
My reaction is, here we go again. So I was around when the whole Rod Farrell thing happened. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Rod Farrell was someone who had become obsessed with vampire role-playing and then brought it into real life and then became a murderer. I honestly feel like a lot of times when these things happen, that the spooky crowd gets the rap for it, you know. And in my personal opinion, I think these people are closet psychos and they attach themselves to something that they think fits their MO. So I can't personally speak about what happened in Ohio, but I can tell you that is not my experience. The violence that ensued is nothing that I am used to. I see a lot of argument online, but
I've never actually heard anyone beheading someone during a ritual unless it was more pagan groups.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. I've interacted with at least 3 cults. They're out there, but they're not chopping heads.
So you mean, is it cults within the vampire community?
Yes.
In and around. There are some cults that actually sort of like are on the fringe ends of it, but not directly inside it.
Is there anything that you've heard of them doing or that either of you have witnessed that's made you uncomfortable?
Yeah, I've been targeted by 3 cults so far. It was and her.
Yeah.
So she was right there with me. I used to be part of one of these cults, and I didn't realize I was in a cult. Someone pointed it out to me, and I immediately left. And that cult is still trying to destroy me financially and socially, and it's been over a decade.
Listen, it's a fascinating conversation. I mean, like I said, I went to the Vampire Bar in New Orleans with my dad because it's kind of like the cool thing to do there. You know, you get the secret passcode, we had a drink, but I had no idea. Sorry, what were you going to say?
You went to Potions. Is that what you're talking about?
Potions, yeah, up on the 2nd floor. Yeah, it was cool. But I didn't realize that, that there was real, like, vampires out there and that there was this whole culture. So it's really interesting. I really appreciate you both coming on and explaining it to us. And thanks so much.
Not a problem.
Thank you.
All right, you never know what you're gonna talk about on this show at 10 o'clock at night. But it's interesting. All right, tomorrow, there's more vampires. Former star of the Vampire Diaries, Ian Somerhalder, joins Dan Abrams live. So even Dan Abrams is going to get in on the Vampire Talk tomorrow night. You're never going to believe what he's doing now, by the way. That'll be tomorrow night on Dan's show. All right, still to come, a heart-pounding race against time to rescue a missing 5-year-old boy with autism. This is such an amazing story, an amazing video, really incredible. A sheriff's deputy charges through the woods into a pond to get the child, and it is just in the nick of time. We've got the heroic deputy who is going to join me live next. Dramatic rescue in Florida. A 5-year-old boy with autism slipped out of his family's home and disappeared. The boy's parents told investigators that the child had an attraction to water, which is very, very common if you have someone in your family on the autism spectrum. So deputies began searching around a pond near the home. Deputy Wes Bruff heard the boy's cries and rushed to find him. And all of it was caught on the deputy's body camera. Take a look.
Coco! Hey, he's out here somewhere. Hey, I got him. X-ray 42 Central, I got him in the water on facing. Come here. Hey, come here, buddy. You got him, He's okay. Okay. What's your name?
Hey, Coco. You want to go see your parents?
You grab that phone and go that
Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. The boy was medically cleared and returned to his family, and Deputy Wes Bruff joins me live now. Deputy Bruff, thank you so much for being with us and for everything you did. I mean, it's just so heartwarming to see that. I can't even imagine, like, what was it like for you when you spotted him and realized, like, he was okay?
It was pretty nerve-wracking at first, but it was a big sigh of relief when I seen his head. At first, I just heard him yelling out when I couldn't find him. And then I seen his head above the water holding on to the log, and it was a huge sigh of relief that he was over there.
So were you all just sort of looking along the water's edge and you just happened to hear something, or how did you know he was in that specific area?
Well, it was a lake close by the house where he was at. We knew, obviously, he was drawn to water. And we had some deputies in the neighborhood looking around in the woods nearby. And, I just took the hope of looking back there at that lake. And I think he caught a glimpse of me walking by and actually screamed out or made noises to catch my attention.
Was the sun, it almost looks like, was it the sun going down at that time?
Yeah, it was starting to get dark out a little bit.
Yeah, that's what I just was thinking watching the whole thing. Like, I was just imagining had, another hour gone by or something, probably would have been a lot more difficult out there.
Yeah, it was definitely a race against time there. So
I've done stories in the past in terms of like how important training is for police officers when it comes to dealing with people with autism, finding kids with autism. Were you able to get any training in the past? Do you think that came into play here?
Well, yeah, we've the sheriff's office has partnered with a couple autism groups that come out and do training with us every year, and I think that does play a big role in interacting with children with autism. Not only on this call, but a bunch of calls that we go to where parents need our help, and that's the situation that we're going to be in is dealing with someone that can't communicate their feelings or emotions just like the rest of the world can.
Yeah, and it's my understanding the boy's parents actually had an alarm on the door, right? So did they know that he got out basically pretty quickly?
Yeah, that alarm went off instantly, and they called 911 pretty fast.
And how long was it from that time to when you guys were able to find him about?
I want to say it was almost 20 minutes.
Oh my gosh, wow.
Which still seems like a long time. It's pretty significant amount of time went by.
Were you able to be there when he was reunited with his family?
Yep. I brought him all the way back up to the road with the fire department to get him checked out, and then the family met us there.
What was that like? I can only imagine.
You can see the raw emotion on the family's face, the tears, the joy of being back with him, and, how scared they were in the moment.
Well, you did an amazing job, Deputy Bruff. Just like you stayed so calm and cool and collected. And I mean, just the video, seeing you just go right out there into the water is really incredible. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for all the hard work you do. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Okay, still to come tonight, citizens joining forces to make their voices heard, their outrage known, and their demand for justice unmistakable. Two different people at the center of two separate tragic events. One's gotten more attention than the other, but that may change after what you see here tonight. On the surface, the circumstances surrounding Karen Reed, and you know that name, Karen Reed, you see her on the left there, and Sandra Birchmore on the right. They could not be more different. You may not have heard of Sandra Birchmore, but are they actually more similar than we realize? People who say these two women are victims of a rotten judicial system. They want accountability. They want big change. We're going to tell you what the two cases have in common. We're going to get into it right after the break. High-profile criminal cases that have people sharply divided in the suburbs of Boston tonight. They both have at their center victims who died way too young. One of them a police officer, the other a young woman expecting her first baby. Now, the two people who died did not know each other, and their deaths were under very, very different circumstances. But how their cases were handled, and many say covered up, has created a growing community of people who say they are sick and tired of being lied to, and their numbers are growing in size and they're growing in volume. You see some of the protests there. These are the faces of the two cases. One is Karen Reed on the left. You all know about her trial, mistrial, and coming retrial on charges she killed her police officer boyfriend. And the other is Sandra Birchmore, 23 years old and found dead in her apartment back in 2021. Sandra's official cause of death was suicide, but that conclusion is now under considerable doubt. What links these two women together? Well, the tragedies around them happened just a few miles apart, and the police officials accused of cover-ups. They report to the same chain of command, and there could be some striking similarities here. Let me bring in Rob D'Amico. He is a retired FBI supervisory special agent. I also want to welcome back to Banfield Melissa Berry. She is not only a friend of the Birchmore family, she also runs a Facebook group called Justice for Sandra Birchmore. It has almost 12,000 active members. Thank you both for coming on. First of all, to you, Rob, do you think it is jumping the gun connecting these two cases? Like, what similarities do you see here?
I see the similarities in the police departments and the district attorney's office. And I see it as a cultural thing up there with most likely a police officer killed her and it was ruled a suicide. And it was overshadowed by everyone just not saying it and going with the suicide when nothing pointed to it. None of the evidence pointed to it. And then when you really started looking at the evidence, it was actually pointing to a cop that did this. And then the district attorney and other law enforcement started just going with that story. And I think on the Karen Reed side, this is a worse story because someone was killed by a police officer. And then Karen was accused of killing her ex-boyfriend, and the investigation was so bad, and there was a whole bunch of other things going on. But it's all the same type police and district attorney that's involved.
Melissa, give me a little bit of the backstory on Sandra. I don't know a ton about the case. When did you start to realize, like, maybe this wasn't what was being portrayed by police?
I saw it on the news that they were doing an internal investigation, and it actually concluded, and I saw it on the news, and I knew something was wrong the second I saw it. I knew that there was so much more to the story, and it basically dropped off the scene. Nobody was covering it anymore. And then, it slowly has started with the work that we've been doing. It has started to pick up more. Sandra was born in Boston. She grew up in Stoughton. She had a single mother. And unfortunately, a lot of people in her life died within a short period of time. And these men started grooming her at 13. She was assaulted, statutory raped at 15. And then the abuse continued till she passed away and was murdered. So
it's just awful. Rob, there were 3 police officers that all resigned from the force. Was that because of the connection and what happened with Sandra's case, or what do you know about that?
Sandra's case started it, but when you looked at why some of them were released, Sandra was in the Explorer program, which is for kids to get involved with police officers and kind of learn and maybe get them to want to be police officers. But unfortunately, this department started using it as a grooming for child molestation and other things. So this case brought some other people starting to look at it. And then the police officers resigned because of things that were coming out on the internal investigation. They still haven't charged anyone with murder on this case. But when you look at like Robert Devine, he was the deputy chief. He's the one who started this Explorers program, and the other ones were involved, and they were using other children too. So it was one of those things that they ended up just resigning to get out of there. But now we're really looking at a murder case involved.
Do you think there might be an investigation happening behind the scenes? I mean, it seems like something the FBI would typically look into, right?
Yes, there are some other investigations going on now, and I don't know if it was started because of Karen Reed or after, but then they started getting connected because one of the police officers that was first on the scene, because even though it was in a different department, Canton, where Karen's Reed case was actually location of where Sandra lived. So one of the first police officers on Sandra's murder scene was actually one of the police officers on Karen Reed's. So you have that overlap there. And I think I'm not sure which one started it first, but I think they dovetailed into 2 separate probably investigations.
It seems like there's a lot more interest now, Melissa, maybe because of the Karen Reed situation. What do you have planned? I mean, I've heard like rumblings of a protest. What's going to be happening, Melissa?
Yeah, on Thursday, we are protesting Michael Morrissey, the district attorney in Norfolk County in Massachusetts. He is doing a fundraiser, so we're going to be protesting that. It's not just us, it's also Karen Reed supporters that are going to be doing that protest. And on the 25th of this month, we are also doing a protest in Canton for Sandra. So we just keep putting it out there, keeping Sandra's name out in the public so people can learn what was done to her, because what was done was horrific.
Yeah, we will certainly stay on it again. I only knew a little bit of what happened, but it's just a terrible, terrible case. Melissa, Rob, thank you both so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Okay, still to come, a dad in Arizona facing first-degree murder charges for the death of his daughter, something his wife calls just a big mistake. She's apparently supporting him still. Newly released body cam video, it's just out, shows his reaction as first responders tried to save the girl after 3 hours alone in that hot car in Arizona. Do the charges fit the crime? We're going to show you the video after this.
Tell your doctor if you have a history of infections or symptoms of an infection. Talk to your neurologist about Vyvgart Hytrulo for GMG and picture your life in motion.
The next story out of Arizona is just an absolute outrage. A father left his 2-year-old daughter in a sweltering car for what police say was more than 3 hours. The child died, and now Christopher Schultes, that's the dad, he's facing first-degree murder charges. Now, this all happened a little over a month ago in Arizona, and now there's body cam footage that has just been released. It shows the moments when cops confronted that dad. Take a look.
Please, baby, please. I can't believe this.
How long was she sleeping in the car out there?
I want to say it was no more than 30, 45 minutes, and I don't think their air was off. So I'm being treated like a murderer?
This is the kind of strange part. You just heard Schultes tell police that he left his daughter Parker in the car at their own house for no more than 30 or 45 minutes while she slept. That's what he said. He said that the air conditioning was running in the car the whole time, but court documents say Parker was actually in the car much, much longer than that, more than 3 hours. 3 hours while Schultes played video games inside the house. Schultes' other kids told investigators that it was not uncommon for him to leave them in cars for long periods of time, and authorities say Schultes' wife scolded him after Parker's death. They were able to get the text messages. She texted him. She's a doctor, by the way. She texted him, quote, "I told you to stop leaving them in the car, and how many times have I told you?" So they established that it's happened before. I'm joined now by criminal defense attorney Ashleigh Lazaro. Thank you for being with us, Skye. What an awful case. I mean, do you think the first-degree murder, is that the appropriate charge here?
I think that is a little high for this type of case. We see this happen, unfortunately, more often than it ever should. And in a lot of these cases, we never even see charges. My guess is when the grand jury saw the text messages, the statements made by the kids, they came back, saying, hey, this wasn't just an accident. Like, this is what this guy does. And so now it's deliberate knowing.
And 3 hours. I mean, how could he even explain that? I guess if he thought the air conditioning was on, he didn't have to worry about the 2-year-old. I mean, 3 hours.
I don't know how you explain that away. I think this is about as bad as it gets, especially when you're in there playing video games. And then he lied. He lied to officers. They know exactly how long, and he said it was 30 or 45 minutes, and I went and checked on her. And so I think, I think first degree is I mean, that's as bad as it gets, right? So it's the harshest you could possibly charge someone. But, if there's a case that warrants it, maybe, I hate to say it as a defense attorney, but maybe this is one of them.
What do you make of the wife? I mean, the fact that she apparently, I was reading more about it today, wants him to get out of jail, wanted the bond, said we need to grieve as a family, which, I mean, it is her husband and you can sort of understand that, but it sounds like she isn't necessarily blaming him.
No, and I've kind of gone back and forth on this today after I read up on some of the new information that came to light, especially her text messages about him drinking and driving with the kids. Like, there was a pattern of behavior with this guy that was clearly problematic. And, I get it's your husband. I get it's the father of your kids. You're doing the best you can to work and hold your family together, but at some point you got to draw the line.
Yeah, no, totally. What did you make of his demeanor in the body camera video? Because it's one thing we heard about the texts, and we've got the breakdown of the timeline now. But in terms of actually seeing him in the kitchen, he kind of got loud and defensive. That's the way some people have described it. Like, what was your like interpretation, take on him? Everybody responds differently. The initial ones, when they were trying to resuscitate her, I thought that was completely appropriate. He's worried about it. But this next one, it's almost like he's rationalized in his mind, and maybe his wife has too, where they've really just conceded that this is an accident and can't be anything else. So the shock, like, what, I'm a murderer, it's in the defensiveness and in the family member kind of coming at law enforcement is not helpful. Yeah, I just...
it's not helpful to his case.
Yeah, I don't get it. I mean, again, I don't get it at all. 5-10 minutes and you run back out, okay, maybe. I still don't even... But the 3 hours, I think a jury... It's just 3 hours and you don't wonder where your 2-year-old is for 3 hours?
I mean, that's the other thing. Did you know where the other children were for those 3 hours? These are young children, and, I'm a parent. I get it. We all do the best we can, and you make mistakes along the way. But, at some point, you check on your kids, I would think.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. It's hard to really have much sympathy with something like this. Ashleigh Lazaro, thank you so much for coming on tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Always glad to be on.
Okay, we have to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. You remember this. Last month, Tessa Trotter beaten, stabbed, burned in front of her 2 children. She'd be dead if not for the men who ran into her burning house, pulled her to safety. After the break, I'm going to give you an update on her condition. You remember there was the interview Ashleigh did with her last week. Oh, so emotional. Well, we've got a positive update, thank goodness. And also you're going to hear from the Good Samaritans, those incredible people who saved her. We've got that coming up right after the break. Tonight with an update to a story that we've been following for more than a month. Tessa Trotter. She was moved from the burn unit of the Tennessee hospital to a rehabilitation center, which is great news, great progress. Her mother posted this photo of Tessa wearing real clothes for the first time since July 1st. Might not sound like a big deal, but when you're in a situation like that, you finally get to wear real clothes again. It's a huge milestone, which we're so happy for her. You'll remember that was the day that she was beaten, stabbed, and set on fire in her Nashville area home in front of her 2 small children. It was an awful story. Her estranged husband is now charged in the attack. Tessa would have surely died if it was not for 2 neighbors who saw the flames coming out of her house and they ran in. They weren't worried about their own lives, but they ran in because they wanted to save her. And earlier, they described the rescue to Ashleigh. Here's some of what they said about that.
I was scared. I'm looking at a woman laying there face first in a pool of blood and her body is smoking. Yeah, I hesitated before grabbing her, but she lifted her left arm. And when she did, I just grabbed it and pulled. And then about that time, a silhouette came through the house, which was the husband, stepped over her body and looked me in my eyes and asked me, was she still alive? That's when I got up and walked down the steps. All I remember thinking is I need to get away from this fella because I had messed his plan up.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine what would have happened if they weren't there and didn't risk their own lives? Incredible. Well, there is a GoFundMe. It's been set up for Tessa. You can find it right there. We've got a screenshot, almost 70,000 raised. You just go to GoFundMe.com, search Tessa Strong. It's Tessa Strong Road to Recovery. If you put that in, you'll be able to find the GoFundMe because she needs the help. It's just such an awful story. It's a miracle she survived. All right, Ashleigh will be back tomorrow. I'm actually going to Pennsylvania tomorrow to dig into the Ellen Greenberg story. Bizarre story. We'll have more on that later in the week. Cuomo's coming up next. Have a great night.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris Cuomo. Thank you for being here with me at NewsNation. Thank you for the birthday wishes. 54. And I think I finally learned something. I'm going to give it to you as food for thought. Here you go. So I discovered that I have been hearing the same, let's say, complaint from the guys I fish with, the guys I fight with, the tradesmen who do everything I can't, the Wall Streeters I used to work with and know, the lawyers that I deal with.